Okay, I know that was a very quick comfort break, but we really want to honor your time and make sure we're done by 1 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Is that okay, Carly, Beth, and Sarah?
Thumbs up.
All right. All right, so thank you very much, Sarah, for getting us grounded in emergent literacy, and for Beth for walking us through the research, and Carly, the materials. So we have a lot of background knowledge now, and what I'm going to do is provide an overview of Module 1, Print Knowledge, which includes Session 1, which is 90 minutes, Session 2, which is 90 minutes, and Session 3, which is 60 minutes. So obviously we can't go through all 3 sessions, but we're going to give you highlights from each session. You'll need your participants guide for Module 1, Print Knowledge. I'm going to use slides and activities directly from Module 1 of the PLC, so slides that you will be using. You'll see and hear the exact content that you will use when you're a facilitator, facilitating these PLC sessions with teachers. Since we, again, don't have the time to experience the whole module and look at every activity, we'll engage in some of the activities, and I'll describe other activities. For most slides, I will first talk to you facilitator to facilitator and explain what you should know about the slide as a facilitator. Then I'm going to talk to you facilitator to participant and say exactly what you, the facilitator, would say to your teachers. Other slides are only informational for you as a facilitator. So you're wearing 2 hats now. You want to think about how you're going to deliver this, and I'll talk to you about that. And then we also want you to experience some of the activities as a participant. So let's get started. All right, all 3 sessions for Module 1 are included in one PowerPoint presentation. Each session begins with a slide that looks like this. And then the facilitator will say, welcome and thank you for participating in our professional learning community on emergent literacy. Today, we'll meet for 90 minutes and begin Module 1 Print Knowledge. Some slides are just for you as a facilitator. So now I'm talking to you as a facilitator. So like this slide, these are the participant activities for Module 1, Session 1. And this exact table is in your facilitator guide to help you prepare for the session. So you see the slide number is in the first column, the page number in the participant guide, where it appears, and then the title of the activity is in the 3rd column. So what I'd like you to do is get your participant guide out, and we're just going to skim. I'm not expecting you to do these activities or read them. I just want you to skim beginning on page 7 of your participant guide. Activity 1 is FAQs about print knowledge. And then look at activity 2 on pages 8 and 9, scenario sort. And then activity 3, videos, comparison of explicit and implicit instruction, found on page 10. And then page 11 is activity 4, features of effective instruction, which Carly had us look at. And then activity 5 is reflect, and that's on page 12. So participants reflect on what they learned that day. And then activity 6 is the plan and implement self-study. Now these are consistent across all the sessions. They're the do, watch, read, self-study activities that participants engage in and complete before they come to the next PLC session. So we anticipate it'll take them between 30 and 60 minutes as their self-study between sessions. And they all follow the same format. They do something, they watch something, and then they read something. Here are the videos for Module 1, Session 1. The table on the slide is included in the facilitator guide to help you prepare. So it tells you the slide number in which each video appears and the link and the duration. So during Session 1, you have 3 videos, Letter Knowledge and Decoding Connection, which is an animation. And then video 2 is Small Group Explicit Instruction. using sound bags, and then video 3 is implicit print knowledge instruction in multiple contexts. Each PLC session begins with this slide. So take a look at that red arrow on the slide. This points to the module number, the session number, and then the slide number. So it's noted at the bottom corner of the slide. For our purposes, if the slide is used exactly as is from the PLC, we kept that there, that kept the information there in case you wanted to follow along. Other slides for this Train the Trainer event include extra information for you as a facilitator. So those slides don't include that information under that red arrow. So the facilitator will say, the purpose of this PLC is to engage in collaborative learning experiences to support preschool teachers in applying evidence-based language and literacy strategies in their instruction. I look forward to learning together. The first session for each module includes the slide. You can adapt it as needed according to your context. The facilitator will say, PLCs typically have norms that the group can agree to in order to be productive. Here are 3 norms or ground rules for our way of work. Cell phones on silent, so we can have an uninterrupted session. Pay attention to yourself and others. This means contributing, listening, and being aware of how you and others are responding to each other. Be sure to give everyone a chance to talk and encourage others who seem reluctant to join in. Sometimes people who are reluctant to talk are thinking. They may not be comfortable jumping in, but they may have something important to say. And then presume positive intentions. This means pausing before responding. Usually when people contribute to a conversation, their intent is to be constructive. So always respond positively to keep the discussions productive. And then you can ask, is there anything else we should add to the list? So these are just 3 norms that you can use, but you can obviously adapt it to your context. You will probably know your teachers. Each time you see a purple banner, it tells us that we will complete an activity from the participant guide. So let's look at activity 1 on page 7. This is FAQs about print knowledge. So we're not going to actually do this activity now, but take a moment to review the FAQs. Your participants will answer these questions during the first session, and they're not expected to know all the answers right now, but just kind of see where they are. And then after the 3rd session of each module, they'll answer those same questions and kind of see how their answers may have changed. So the facilitator will say, review the frequently asked questions about print knowledge, record your initial responses in the middle column of the table. We will return to this activity at the end of the print knowledge module to compare responses. So this activity is consistent across all of the modules. Each session includes a slide like this. Notice step 2 in the upper left-hand corner. Step 1 is debrief, but there's nothing to debrief from since this is our first session. The facilitator will say, our goals for session 1 are to understand the purpose of our PLC, the framework for each session, and explore our participant guide. We'll also dive into the content that you read prior to the session. So we will learn about print knowledge and why it is important and understand the features of effective instruction. To reach these goals, we will follow the 5-step process previously described. Activities include discussions, watching and reflecting on videos, practicing instructional strategies, making instructional plans, and implementing and reflecting on those plans. Here are the topics for the self-study reading you did before this session. You'll want to encourage your participants to complete the self-study readings and activities before each session so everyone can participate in a meaningful way. So we're not actually going to do this activity now. Several of these collaborative activities are sprinkled throughout the PLC session. So the facilitator will say, each time you see this icon on the slide, it means we have a collaborative activity, usually a discussion that is not in the participant guide. Let's dive into print knowledge by discussing the content you read prior to this session. What is print knowledge? Why is print knowledge important, and features of effective instruction? So you'll ask your participants to consider this question. What is print knowledge? To discuss this, we will use a method for accountability talk called turn and talk. This is where you take turns talking and listening with your shoulder partner or person next to you. This is an excellent way to have every child in your classroom engage at once rather than calling on one child at a time to respond. So right now, turn and talk to your shoulder partner about this question. What is print knowledge? We will share out in 30 seconds. So then your participants would actually turn and talk, and then you would ask volunteers to share what their highlights of their discussion. On this side, the facilitator will say, print knowledge includes knowledge of letter names, letter sounds, and concepts of print. As a quick reminder, when letters are written with no other symbol, we say the letter name. For example, M, S, O. When letters are written with forward slashes on both sides of the letter, we say the letter sound. For example, M, S, A. When you see the symbol above the vowel that looks like a smile, say the short sound for that vowel. If you see a line above the vowel, say the long sound or its name. Understanding concepts of print means being aware of the difference between letters and other symbols. Concepts of print is also the understanding that we read from left to right and that the words on the page, not the pictures, convey the meaning. The facilitator will say, children come to preschool with a variety of experiences. Some have had many literacy experiences at home, like frequently discussing the day's events, singing the alphabet song, and being read to. Others have not had many of these experiences or have had them infrequently. So it's important to keep in mind that although we are not teaching children to read in the conventional sense in preschool, we are building their emergent literacy skills so that when formal reading instruction begins, they'll have a solid foundation needed to learn to become successful readers. So print knowledge is one of the precursors or the building blocks to become a skilled reader. Children's reading development depends on understanding the alphabetic principle, which is the understanding that there are systematic and predictable relationships between written letters and spoken sounds. Children can use their knowledge about letter names and sounds to gradually develop an understanding of the alphabetic principle. Measures of preschool and kindergarten children's print knowledge are associated with achievement in decoding, spelling, and reading comprehension outcome measures in kindergarten and beyond. Okay, so every module includes a slide that looks like this. You'll provide your emergent literacy state standards for each participant or show them where to locate the standards online. You'll explain to participants that standards are what a child should know and be able to do by the end of the school year. You'll have participants review the state standards and notice that print knowledge is included as a key learning goal, and also have them highlight keywords that you discussed that are related to print knowledge. So getting their hands into the standards. For example, the facilitator will say, if you work with 3- and 4-year-old children, it's important to become familiar with your state's learning standards for both age ranges. In fact, since children's learning and development are not uniform, it's helpful for all teachers to be familiar with learning progressions so they can build upon the individual and developmental characteristics of each child. When reviewing your state standards for 3- and 4-year-olds, you may find that they're located within different documents. For example, many states include 3-year-old standards with early learning guidelines for children birth through age 3. In addition, it can be helpful to familiarize yourself with the kindergarten standards related to language and literacy in your state. These are likely in a separate document as well. So basically, we just want to get your participants knowing where the state standards are, how they're organized, and locating specific print knowledge keywords that are important. And understanding that it's important not just to know the age range that you work with, but what comes before and what comes after, because even that age range you work with, you know you're going to have some that are ready to move on and some that need some foundational. Throughout the modules, explicit instruction typically follows the same instructional routine of the teacher explaining and modeling, then guiding practice, and then providing independent practice. So here the facilitator will say, explicit instruction typically follows the I do, we do, you do instructional routine, where the teacher explains and models for I do, and then provides guided practice with scaffolded instruction for we do. And then children are provided independent practice opportunities and cumulative review for you do. Explicit instruction is used to introduce new skills or concepts. So it's important to provide cumulative review where children practice previously taught skills or concepts and thereby benefit from repeated practice. So cumulative review can be included during explicit instruction. For example, when you're practicing a new letter name and you include letter names that you have previously taught them, that's cumulative review. Cumulative review can also occur when children work independently at learning centers and when they're practicing those previously explicitly taught skills and concepts. So here the facilitator will say, although all types of instruction can create meaningful teacher-child interactions that can support learning, it's usually more effective to introduce new skills and concepts using explicit instruction. The I do, we do, you do instructional routine helps children understand what is expected and provides them opportunities to practice with feedback from the teacher. So for example, here's an example for if you're teaching the letter N. For explicit instruction, you would show the letter N. This is the letter N. It says N. Nest begins with N. Nest. Let's share other words that begin with N. And you would have the students practice saying the letter N, saying the sound, thinking of words that begin with N. So that's the explicit instruction. An example of implicit instruction is when they're practicing the skill that you explicitly taught. So for example, if you're conducting a read aloud and you ask them to, every time they hear a word that starts with N or sees an N, they put their thumb up. So that's an example of implicit instruction. And then incidental instruction takes advantage of those teachable moments. So for example, at snack time, if you say, can anyone find the letter N on your cracker wrapper or something like that. So that's an example of incidental instruction. After skills or concepts have been explicitly taught, then implicit and incidental instruction can be used for review and practice. All right, so let's turn to activity 2 on page 8 and 9 of your participant guide. This is called scenario sort. I'll describe this activity and we'll do just one item from it. So this is an activity that you'll prepare ahead of time. You can cut apart the scenarios, the instructional scenarios, and they're on little cards if time permits. If you don't have the time to do that, so teachers would actually sort these scenarios. If you don't have the time to do that, you can just ask teachers to circle the answer on each card. So if you look on page 9, you'll see the instructional scenarios and they would just circle either explicit, implicit, or incidental. So you'll have your participants work in pairs. They'll read each classroom scenario about teaching print knowledge and determine its instructional category. Is it explicit instruction, implicit, or incidental? Answers and key points about the activity are included in your speaker notes of your PowerPoint. So through discussion, you'll note that all 3 types of instruction are important. They serve 3 different purposes. Explicit instruction should be used to introduce a new skill or concept. And implicit instruction reinforces what you taught explicitly, and incidental are those teachable moments. All right, let's try one. Look at number 10. It's also on the slide right here in the gray box. Read the scenario and determine which type of instruction it depicts. So in the chat, type which type of instruction you think this scenario describes. I'll give you just a minute. Remember, explicit introduces a new skill or concept or reteaches children who need intervention. Implicit, you're practicing a previously taught skill, and incidental is an unplanned teachable moment. I see answers. Yep. Explicit, explicit, explicit. Great. Yes. The teacher instructs, which indicates the I do, we do, you do instructional routine. She worked with specific children. So she specifically worked with those children on those letters. So they had not been mastered through explicit instruction before. So she was doing it again. So in this case, the teacher is reteaching children. Good. Thank you. All right. At the beginning of all activities, there'll be an approximate time noted for you in the slide speaker notes. So we're going to actually do this activity. So everyone get ready. The speaker notes on the slides will also give you a brief overview of the activity. In this activity, participants will compare 2 videos. Okay. So the facilitator will say, and again, get ready because we're going to do this one. Let's watch 2 videos on instruction of print knowledge. The first video demonstrates explicit instruction, and the second video demonstrates implicit instruction across a preschool day. So turn to activity 3 on page 10, in your participant guide. So as you watch each video, record evidence of explicit and implicit instruction and print knowledge in the appropriate column at the top. So you see the table at the top of page 10. On the left side is evidence of explicit instruction for the first video, and on the right side is evidence of implicit instruction for the second video. Okay, so we will start this video and take notes of evidence of explicit instruction.
Explicitly teaching letter names and letter sounds in small group lessons allows teachers to differentiate instruction, focusing on the letters that a particular group doesn't know yet. While explicitly teaching letter names and sounds, teachers use concise, specific language directly related to the lesson objective. The objective in this video is introducing the letter name S and reviewing the letter name M in a sorting activity. The teacher and children work closely together to find the target letters. When children struggle, the teacher is readily available to correct misunderstandings and scaffold instruction with helpful prompts.
Here's the letter S. Everybody say S.
S.
Summer begins with the letter S. Listen for the S in summer. 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 These letters are the same. They are both what letter?
Summer.
What letter?
S.
S. They are both the letter S. This is an uppercase letter. S.
Summer.
Uppercase letters are used for special words like our names. So everybody's name begins with a big letter. And then lowercase letter S's letters are used for words that are not so special, like sock or sandwich or sand.
Or popcorn.
Popcorn does use a lowercase letter. Now, let's look at all these letters. In this bag, there are some S's in this bag. And there are also some M's in this bag. You remember we learned about the letter M? So, what you're going to do is, you're going to reach your hand in here, Ava, listen, and you're going to pull out a letter. I picked the letter S. So I'm going to say, I put it right here. So I'm going to say S. And I'm going to trace it with my finger. So I want you to do the same thing. And then, let's see. We have an S bag. And M. What letter is that?
W.
W?
Yeah.
You think it's W?
M.
Or is it an M? What do you think? You think it's W? Let's see. What letter do you think this is?
M.
This is the letter M. Can you trace it with your finger? Say M.
M.
Let her do it. Say M. So what letter do you think this is?
Ow.
M. Now if you turn it upside down, then it would be a W, but it is a M. So what bag would you put that in? The M bag or the S bag? M, good job. And I'm going to put the S that I had in the S bag. Alright, Kennedy, put your hand in there, pick your letter out. What letter did you pick? M. Can you trace it with your finger? Say M.
I'm going to kill my eyes. Okay.
M. Now, Kennedy, is that a lowercase m or an uppercase
I'm
M?
going to take lowercase.
How do you know that's a lowercase m? What's different? Hey, can y'all tell me?
Banana.
Nevaeh, Ava, how are these different? How is the uppercase M different from the lowercase m?
Because that one's short, that one's big.
That one is short, that one is big. How else are they different?
Because they got one right up and one right there.
So this one is curved, and this one just has straight lines. That's how you know. Alright, so where would you put your M? In the M bag or the S bag? M bag. Good job. Alright, your turn, Jasmine. Can you put the letter out of the bag? Alright, what letter did you pick, Jasmine? Can you trace it with your finger? What letter is that? S. You think that one is an S? What do you think it is then? You want to help her out, Ava? What letter do you think that is? M. That's an M. So can you trace it with your finger and say M?
M. Ooh, it started with M.
Now, what bag would M go in?
This bag.
This bag. Alright. Your turn, Ava. What letter do you have?
M.
M. Can you trace with your finger and say M?
M.
Alright, and what bag would M go in? Which bag? Which one?
1,
Put it in
2,
there.
3.
Good job. I think we have sorted our S's and our M's.
Okay, so because of our time, can you drop some comments in the chat? What did you notice about, what kind of evidence did you see of explicit instruction in that lesson? She had only M and S letters in the bag. She did a lot of modeling. Yes, I do, we do, you do. I do, we do, you do. Good. Introduce, example. Yes, multisensory manipulatives. Yes, the scaffolds. I love those instructional scaffolds that she gave. Nice. Gave feedback right away, immediate feedback. Very good. Yes, especially when the child thought the M was a W and she showed the M and had her trace it and say M and then decide which bag it went in. That was a great scaffold. Real world examples. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, now we are going to go on to our next video. And this one is about implicit instruction and print knowledge in multiple contexts. So you're going to watch a teacher across the school day implement some of these strategies.
Print knowledge is a basic building block of emergent literacy. As children develop print knowledge, they recognize and produce letter names and letter sounds. Once letters and their sounds are explicitly introduced in a lesson, teachers implicitly reinforce those letters and encourage practice throughout the preschool day.
Yes, that's right. So I have our box that I've used before with the letter what?
S.
What letter is that?
S.
S, that's right. Let's see what's in here. Another one, what's that? Sun. Sun, start with S. Sun. All right, we'll pass them around. What's this one?
Sailboat.
A sailboat. Good job, Jackson. Does sailboat start with an S?
It goes on. It could go on that way.
Oh, that's right, because we've got the water for our Noah's Ark under here. Ooh, I needed some of these today on my way here, and I left them at home. What are they? What kind of glasses?
Sunglasses.
Sunglasses. Sunglasses starts with S. Someone's name sitting right here starts with an S. Whose is it? Silas. That's right, Evan. Silas starts with an S. That's why I thought it was super special that he's our line leader. The letter we're learning today is S, and Silas is our line leader. Look, does Silas just have one S?
No, 2 S.
2 S's, one at the beginning and one at the end, right? Silas. Jackson, you said you saw some letters on this page. What letter did you see?
S.
How many?
2.
2 S's. You know why? Because this book is called Silly Sally. Do you know anybody with the name Sally?
No.
Well, we're going to read about silly Sally. What do you think is silly about her? Look at my book. What do you think is silly about her?
Funny swinging flowers around.
Because she's flinging flowers around. That's right. Is she standing up tall like we do when we walk? No. What's she doing?
Staying on her head.
She's on her head. That's right. Do you think that's why she's silly?
And upside down.
She's upside down. That's right. Silly Sally went to town walking backwards, upside down. You were right, Silas and Evan. She's upside down. And she's walking backwards. That sounds hard.
Can you raise your hand if your snack starts with the letter
I
S?
was just looking. I think we're
Does anybody have a snack that starts with the letter S?
I have popcorn.
You have popcorn. Somebody has, two people have
Oh, I see some.
sticks. Veggie sticks or veggie straws. And what does Harper have? What are those? Pretzel what? Pretzel sticks.
And
And I don't think anybody else, but like my family does this, but we call these squeezies. Squeezies.
Help me.
Oranges. Oranges don't start with S. They start with O.
Thank you.
What's this go with? What?
Can you say the word?
Oh, my goldfish start.
Goldfish
Excuse
starts
me,
with
Laurie?
a G.
Silly Sally, what did Silly Sally do?
Walk upside down.
Who did it outside? Do you remember?
Me.
Ava Grace was like Silly Sally.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did.
Did you try it too?
I tried
Silly?
it too. Okay, I'll try it in here.
Oh, no, we're not gonna do it right now. Evan, clearly we might hit somebody. Ready? Silly Sally walked to town with different kinds of what? Animals. Good, Elizabeth. With a what? A pig and a dog. And C. If, since we're doing S's, you can help me think of some other animals that start with an S. If you need help, I can pull some out of my, ready for this?
Yeah.
Sandbox. Does sandbox start with an S?
Yeah. Seahorse.
Seahorse. That was one we learned earlier. And look, I have some seahorses in my sandbox. And a seal in my sand. There are also hidden in here. Are you ready? What is that?
You know my dad.
An S. You touched a stingray. Then there are also some, what are these?
Popsicle stick.
Like a stick, right? You can take this stick. You can use the letter S right here to help you. There's more in there. And you can write in the sand the letter S. You can sit at the table and you can practice doing what? Oh, goodness. Writing the letter S. And then I think you could use a sponge with water to wipe it off. That'd be fun. So that's one. You can practice writing your letter S's. Some of you get to do a fun activity with me called Rhyme Time. We're going to practice our rhyming words.
I didn't go
Okay.
rhyming.
You want to? Well, girl, I was thinking you might come with me. We'll all have some turns. What letter is this? S. Good. You are going to get some. Are you ready? Stickers to put over the S. Right? We've done that before, where you trace the S with stickers. Right?
You did it. Good job,
Snakes
Leland.
eat mice.
Let's get our boards nice and clean, and one more time we're going to try to write an S, okay? Do your best S you've ever done. 1, 2, 3.
A sun.
Oh my goodness! You did it!
It's kind of
that?
I did too.
High five.
Mine's
High five.
Good job, Jackson. Keep working. We're
Five.
just a few
It does.
minutes.
You're right. It looks like a 5.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Sound the same in the middle. All right, hold on.
Take a nap.
I have to pull from somewhere over here to make it ready. Rug, and let's do this one. All right, what about rug?
Okay, so in the chat, drop some evidence that you saw of implicit instruction. And I see Gateman got us started. Excellent observations. She linked activities to previous lessons or knowledge. She reviews previously taught letter S. So there we go. That's an example of cumulative review. Yep, the children practice the print knowledge skills during both explicit and implicit instruction. Oh, these are great. They're so fast. Yep, other beginning sounds are touched on from just the discussion. The children just brought up some other beginning sounds, and so the teacher addressed that. Yep, pointed out S's during informal times like meals. And I was out on the playground with this class, and they were talking about S's out on the playground too, and words that begin with S. Yep, she gave a lot of hints, but allowed the children to give answers. That's right. Great, great. Thank you so much for your participation. This is excellent. Okay. Let's see. So at the end of each session, there's a set of self-study activities that I described before. So it's something for them to do, something to watch, and something to read. So for example, this is the end of session 1. And so they will answer the reflection questions on page 13. They'll watch 2 videos that are shown that we watched during this session. But instead of focusing on implicit and explicit instruction, they're going to focus on how the teacher organized the classroom to include print knowledge in their centers. So they're going to rewatch those videos, but focus on a different aspect. And then they'll also read the self-study reading for session 2 and know any questions or comments that they have. Each session ends with a slide that looks like this. The facilitator will say, "We have now completed session 1. Thank you for your collaboration and a great first PLC session on emergent literacy." And we are going to dive right into session 2. It's about teaching print knowledge using small group explicit instruction. The facilitator will say, "Welcome and thank you for continuing to participate in our professional learning community on emergent literacy. Today we'll meet for 90 minutes to continue module 1, print knowledge." And again, these are the participant activities for module 1, session 2. This table is in your facilitator guide, but let's take a look. There's 6 activities in session 2, but keep in mind that that first one, activity 6, is the plan and implement from session 1. So they're going to have to go back to session 1, and you start with that and share out their reflections. So let's look at page 20 in your participant guide. So turn to page 20. And again, you're just going to skim these activities for this session, just to give you kind of a little idea of what we're doing in session 2. So evidence of high quality small group explicit instruction. And then activity 8 is on page 21, and that's compare and contrast small and whole group instruction. And then activity 9 is on page 22 through 26, and this is a role play activity. So there's actually lesson plans with scripts and with materials. So during the PLC session, your participants will role play being the teacher and being the child, and then switching roles. They'll work in triads to do this. And then activity 10 is on page 27, and they'll reflect on what they talked about during the session. And activity 11 is the self-study, the do, watch, read self-study activities that they'll do between this session and session 3. Here are the videos for session 2. Again, this is a table from your facilitator guide. It tells you which slide each video is on, the link and the duration. There are 3 videos included in session 2: small group explicit instruction using letter sound spinners, whole group instruction using letter sound spinners. So we're watching the same lesson, and we can compare and contrast advantages of small group and of whole group. And then video 6 is scaffolding during small group explicit instruction. So here's an example of the first step debrief in the 5-step process for collaborative learning. In this case, participants are returning for session 2. So the first thing they'll do is debrief their self-study assignment from session 1. So that's the first thing they do. So in this example, the facilitator would say, "Let's dive back into print knowledge. Before coming to this session, you completed activity 6 from your participant guide. These self-study activities included something for you to do, to watch, and to read." So please turn to this activity on page 13 so we can debrief and share our reflections. So then the facilitator walks through the activity and asking participants to share. This is an example of a quick 3-minute activity designed to get participants back into the self-study reading. So we will actually do this activity. So make sure you have your participant guide and turn to page 15 and 16. So your participant guide for module 1, page 15 and 16. Okay. The facilitator will say, step 3 of the collaborative learning cycle is learn and confirm. The goals for step 3 are to learn something new about teaching print knowledge in small groups and to confirm some things that we already know. So in session 1, we learned that effective instruction includes a scope and sequence. A scope and sequence provides an overview of instruction that includes the content or scope to be taught and the order or sequence in which the content is taught. The scope and sequence for print knowledge includes the letter names and letter sounds to be taught and the order in which they are taught. Some teachers have access to a curriculum that includes a scope and sequence for print knowledge. Many teachers do not have access to this, and so will need to develop their own scope and sequence. This means that you may need to make decisions about the order in which you'll explicitly teach all 26 letter names and many letter sounds. So let's look at item 1 on the slide. You can show me a thumbs up or say yes in the chat. Show me a thumbs up if you answer yes, and a thumbs down or a no. You can just drop in the chat. Is there one right scope and sequence to teach letter names and letter sounds? Oh, no. Great. Okay, correct. There is not one right scope and sequence to teach letter names and letter sounds, but we do have some evidence to help guide our decisions when we need to create our own scope and sequence. So let's look at pages 15 and 16 in your participant guide. Locate and highlight or underline 3 things we know from evidence that can help guide our decisions when we need to create our own scope and sequence to teach letter names and letter sounds. So I'm going to give you a minute to look at page 15 and 16 and just drop in the chat anything that you see that would help guide our decisions if we're creating our own scope and sequence. Yep, focus on a few letters per week. Use the beginning of children's names letters. Yep, start with names. I see. Children learn best when they have frequent exposure and plenty of repetition. Good. Good, awesome. Explicit pre-plan, yes. Okay, excellent. Thank you for your participation. That's awesome. So here the facilitator would say, here are some evidence-based guidelines that you may have underlined or highlighted. Explicitly teach a few letters each week, which you said, using cumulative review. Cumulative review occurs when instruction builds on skills you previously taught. When using cumulative review, letters are explicitly taught, practiced, and revisited. So you don't just teach it once and then forget about it. We always bring it back up for more practice. If cumulative review is not used, children are not provided with the multiple practice opportunities needed to solidly learn a skill or concept. So be sure that after you explicitly teach a letter, you review it often that day and in future lessons. And then also starting with letters in a child's name, which you all brought up, because they hear their name often and they're interested in their name. So that's a good place to start. Also starting with letter names that include the letter sound when you say them is helpful. For example, when you say B, the first sound you say is B. A non-example is the letter Y, because when you say the letter name for Y, you do not hear the E sound. So letter name is Y, the sound is Y. You don't hear it when you say the letter name. So look at the first set of letters on the slide at the bottom. Say each letter name and its sound. So just say it where you are right now. So B, B, D, D. Now do the same for the second set of letters. What do you notice? And you can drop in the chat. What do you notice about the difference between the B, D, J, K, and T and that second set of letters, M, N, R, and S? For students who struggle, it's best to begin with letters like the first set of letters where the sound is at the beginning. That's right. That's exactly right. You got it. So yes, the first set of letters is more straightforward for children because the letter names beginning sound and the letter sound is the same. So B, B. But for example, the M and the N, when you say M, the first sound is eh. So beginning with the B, the D, the J, those letters on the left might be easier for some children. All right, there's much more to session 2, but due to our time, we're going to move on. Each session ends with a slide that looks like this, and you'll say, we have now completed session 2. Thank you for your teamwork during our Emergent Literacy PLC session. And here's the introductory slide, which should look familiar by now. This session includes teaching print knowledge and using print referencing during read-alouds. So it also includes considerations for English learner students and students with disabilities and additional resources. So we'll review the considerations section for each module on day 3 of this Train the Trainer event. Here are a few highlights from session 3. You will say, welcome and thank you for continuing to participate in our professional learning community on emergent literacy. Today, we'll meet for 60 minutes to conclude module 1, print knowledge. You're all familiar with this table by now. This is in your facilitator guide to help you prepare for session 3. And again, the first activity you do is from the previous session. So it's that self-study. So you'll start with that activity. But let's look at page 35 of your participant guide and just quickly skim these activities. So on page 35, we have activity 12. Video viewing guide, print referencing during read-alouds. And then page 36 is activity 13, lesson plan for print referencing during read-alouds. They create a lesson plan. And then on page 37 is the reflect, where they reflect on the content from today. And then they go back to page 7, which is the frequently asked questions about print knowledge. So remember, at the third session of every module, you start with FAQs and you end with FAQs. So you want to see how the participants have grown over the 3 sessions or if their ideas have changed. And then the last thing you do is plan and implement the self-study, the do, watch, read, self-study activities. And here are the videos for session 3, print referencing during read-alouds and small group explicit instruction for the letter M. So sprinkled throughout each module are think, pair, share activities. And they're designated with this icon of people talking with each other. So we're not actually going to do this activity, but here's how you'll facilitate it. The facilitator will say, during step 3 of the collaborative learning cycle, we will learn about print referencing during read-alouds. The goal for step 3 is to learn something new, as well as confirm some things that we already know. Let's talk about print referencing during read-alouds using a think, pair, share. So I'll pose a question and you think about a response, share it with your colleague, and then we'll have volunteers share out their responses. So the question is, what does print referencing during read-alouds mean to you? Provide an example of a time that you use print referencing during read-alouds. So then you allow some time for them to talk about it, and then you ask for volunteers to share out. For this slide, the facilitator will say, like explicit instruction in small groups, print referencing during read-alouds is another evidence-based strategy for teaching print knowledge. This instructional strategy is implemented when you include specific print-focused activities during read-alouds. In other words, as you read a text to children, strategically focus their attention on the print. Children typically look at the pictures while being read to, so embedding specific print-focused activities during read-alouds can help them increase their print knowledge. So I think you all know this, but who remembers from your reading what percentage of the time preschool children typically look at print while being read to? Who remembers what percentage of time Less than 5%. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So when we teach print knowledge using print referencing, you'll use two methods. You'll use explicit verbal print referencing, and you'll use explicit nonverbal print referencing. So for example, verbal print referencing is when you ask a question or comment about the print. So if you said, can you find the N on this page? Like on the left of the slide. And this is the word happy, while pointing to the word happy. And then nonverbal print referencing includes pointing to print and tracking while reading. So tracking is running your finger under the words as you read them. An example of print referencing during read aloud is when you explain the difference between a letter and a word while pointing to examples of a letter and a word within the text. So again, we're not going to do this activity, but let's take a look at it. This is on page 36 of your participant guide, page 36 of your participant guide. And this is activity 13, lesson plan for print referencing during read-alouds. So what your participants will do, they'll review the examples of print referencing during read-alouds in that table on the activity. You'll see there's 3 print, book and print organization, letters, and words. So they'll review those examples. And they would have brought a children's book. Part of what they have to do is bring a children's book to this session. So they're going to review their children's book that they brought and designate places where they plan to use print referencing. So they'll write each instance of print referencing on a separate sticky note and then place that note on the page where they plan to use print referencing. They'll share their plans with a colleague and demonstrate one from each of the 3 categories. So they'll actually work together and role play, demonstrating one of the 3 categories, making sure to use both nonverbal and verbal print referencing. And the other thing that we would like to encourage, that if you have a group of teachers at the same center or the same school, you can encourage them to share their books with each other, because then the Post-it notes are already there. They don't even have to think about the print referencing part. It's already done for them. During the last session of each module, we revisit the FAQs from the first session. So the facilitator will say, remember these FAQs about print knowledge from session 1? Please take 5 minutes to read each question and record responses, and then compare your responses from the first session. And you'll allow time for them to do that, and then ask for volunteers to share their responses. We have now completed session 3, the final session in module 1, print knowledge. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and working as a team in our Emergent Literacy PLC. So I know that was a lot of information about module 1, but I want to just pause and see if you have any questions about what we've discussed so far. Anything about anything, the content, how it's organized, any reflections that you might have. This is awesome. Awesome. I love it.
There was a great question in the chat about scope and sequence that I think Beth responded to, if you want to scroll up a little bit.
Okay. Okay, Beth's response, was it about, remember that teaching letter names and letter sounds are different? Is that one? Is that the one?
No, I responded to a question about
sorry.
starting with names, but also paying attention to a more universal scope and sequence, with a reminder that both can be going on at the same time, that children can experience collective activities and more individualized activities. And because print knowledge should be a spiral and lots of community review and letters never just encountered once, these things can be going along in an interwoven path all throughout the year.
Okay.
There's some excellent questions in the chat about some of our terminology. For example, why read aloud and not shared reading? That one I don't even remember the answer to.
I thought thought you were going to say read aloud and dialogic reading. That one we have an answer to, but I don't know.
I think we were trying to use the most universal term possible, because what you'll see is that throughout the different modules, especially in the modules on various aspects of oral language, we really make an effort to differentiate different kinds of read aloud for different purposes. So, and sometimes people equate the term shared reading with a particular focus. And so our goal was to use the term read aloud so that it had a more generic connotation, and then with the idea that every read aloud a teacher does ideally should be infused with purpose, but that purpose for every read aloud does not necessarily and should not be the same. So you change the books you pick, and you change the way you do the read aloud, and you change what you focus on in the read aloud to suit the intentional instructional goals of using that particular book. So that was our intention there.
Okay, may I jump in? And I was the one that asked the question, and that helps me understand it. But, I'm just thinking with little people, and a lot of times they have way too many of them on the floor to be able to see the print in a read aloud. And so that's why I was just wondering, it would be okay to use a big book if it was
Absolutely.
a purpose. Okay.
But we would also say, and you see this throughout the book, that that's another reason why small groups are good. To get up close and personal. And
I'm right there with you. It's just trying to get them over there to our side. I agree.
So, but yes, certainly, and that's the whole point. So if you're doing a whole group read aloud with print referencing as your focus, then picking a big book to match your materials to your intentionality is exactly the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are great comments. Thank you, Beth, for answering those questions. And these are great comments. Love the focus on individual child based on their needs and where they are in the continuum. Yep. Easy to follow for presenters. That was our goal. We really wanted to make this a user-friendly resource that's accessible. So I appreciate those comments. Okay. Obviously, if more questions come up or if we missed one, get in touch with us, let us know, or drop it in the chat again. Before we move, and I am really impressed with our team. I just have to say that we kept to our internal agenda of time. So we even have a couple minutes to take a stretch break. But we're going to move to breakout rooms. So just before you go and refill your water, there'll be a facilitator in each breakout room to guide you through discussion about module 2. So Beth, Sarah Hughes, Carly, and myself will be in each breakout room. So take 5 minutes to stretch, to refill your water, coffee, tea, and then Nathan will send us to breakout rooms.
That's correct. You want me to do that now or when everybody comes back from break?
I think you can do that now.
All
but
right.
Please, everybody come back.
Yep. I'm sending you to your breakout rooms right now. Thanks, everybody.